Welcome to the Ascent of Mount Carmel channel. This channel is devoted to a reading and better understanding of the book Ascent of Mount Carmel by St. John of the Cross. Today we're on the 7th chapter of the 3rd book. In this relatively short chapter, St. John introduces a second kind of apprehension of the memory called imaginary apprehensions of the memory. As you recall, over the last 5 chapters, St. John discussed natural apprehensions of the memory. As you probably recall, in the 2nd book of Ascent of Mount Carmel, St. John discussed supernatural phenomena of the senses, which he called imaginary visions and also spiritual visions. St. John advised us that these things are to be rejected. However, even when we do reject them, when they pass through the soul, they tend to leave lasting impressions on the soul. And so, it's these lasting impressions that St. John calls the imaginary apprehensions of the memory. These are the images, forms, figures, or ideas that still remain in our memory or fancy. St. John tells us that if we want to attain the perfect and pure hope that comes with union with God, we should not ever reflect upon these forms and figures and knowledge that might have passed through our minds from spiritual visions. We should not be tempted to take comfort or pleasure from looking back on those memories. There is no reason to dwell on them. As you recall from our discussion in the book 2, when spiritual visions do come from God, the effect that God desires is imparted to the soul immediately. So when we occupy ourselves with replaying the spiritual visions in our mind, we just end up preserving that unwanted residue in our memory. Therefore, we need to leave behind that residue and we need to move forward.
I don't believe in living in the past. I think the past is for cowards. You live in the past, you die in the past.
We must ever bear in mind this principle. The greater heed the soul gives to any clear and distinct apprehensions, whether natural or supernatural, the less capacity and preparation it has for entering into the abyss of faith, wherein are absorbed all things else. No supernatural forms or kinds of knowledge which can be apprehended by the memory are God, and in order to reach God, the soul must void itself of all that is not God. We need to empty our souls to make room for God. We must strip our memories of the spiritual visions that we might have had so that we might be united with God in hope. All possessions, including the possessions of memories of spiritual visions, are contrary to hope. Now, faith is the substance of all things to be hoped for. Therefore, the more the memory is darkened, the greater hope we will have. The more hope we have, the greater union we might have with God. St. John tells us that in regard to God, the more the soul hopes, the more it attains. And it hopes most when it is most emptied. And when it shall be perfectly emptied, it will remain with the perfect fullness and possession of God in divine union. St. John tells us that there are probably many people who will dwell on the memories of things such as spiritual visions, but in savoring the sweetness of them, they detour themselves from achieving the much greater prospect of divine union. Every one of you that does not renounce all that he possesses cannot be my disciple. Well, I hope you enjoyed this installment of Ascent of Mount Carmel. We'll be back again in about a week with another one, but in the meantime, please pray for the church.
Forget about it, you know? But then, it's also like if something is the greatest thing in the world, like minga those peppers, forget about it, you know? But it's also like saying go to hell, too. Forget about it.
Forget about it. Paulie, forget about it.
Sometimes it just means forget about it.